The LG Procast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The views or opinions expressed by the podcast hosts and guests do not necessarily reflect the official position of LG. For the latest and most accurate information about LG products, please consult relevant product manuals and related documentation. The information provided in this podcast episode is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute professional advice. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, or suitability of the information discussed.
Welcome to another episode of the LG Procast. I'm Phillip Kriegbaum, and out here in sunny and downright hot Phoenix, Arizona today for the LG Leadership Conference, and I'm joined with by Panama Bartholomy. Thanks for being here, Panama. Panama is the director at the Building Decarbonization Coalition, which is a multi-sector forum advocating for and creating solutions for our pollution-intensive building stock. So welcome, Panama.
Thank you, Phillip. Good
that was
to
a
be here.
mouthful.
Yeah.
So maybe you can break that down and tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, what Building Decarbonization Coalition is all about.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the podcast. First of all, always excited to do anything with LG, and you guys are real leaders in this space. So I'm really happy to be here and joining you in very hot Arizona. So I've been involved in the energy space for about 25 years, about half of it working in government, half of it working in the nonprofit sector. And in 2017, I started to see a real shift happening in buildings that I'd never seen before. All of a sudden, we weren't talking just about energy efficiency. We're actually talking about how do you completely eliminate pollution from buildings. And that means a transition off of propane and natural gas over to all electric appliances. And we're seeing this conversation happen all over the country. What I wasn't seeing is that you had a whole bunch of the different parts of the market all working together on this. You had utilities, manufacturers, installers, environmental groups, government agencies, all having their own conversations and not coming together to actually create solutions. And in my experience, those are the things that actually work, is when everybody can get together, can agree on something, can agree on timelines, codes, how the process is going to work. Those are the things that are the most resilient on when you actually implement them. And so we created the coalition to create a forum where people could get together and agree on, 80%. Let's get to work on that 80% so we can build some trust and faith in each other. That'll make that 20% that we don't agree on a little bit easier to work on. Cool. And so we work in three different areas. We work in public policy, changing laws. We work in market development. So how do you create a better market environment for electrification? And then we work on the consumer demand side. We run consumer programs to educate people and help them be able to make the switch.
Right. So what are some of the big initiatives or big wins that you've seen? I know you said you kind of got going around 2017, so we're 7 years into it. What are you seeing that has changed since then?
Yeah, it's an incredibly exciting space to work in, and usually buildings, people don't ever say that. And it's exciting because we've seen some of the fastest growth of building electrification than we've seen in any clean energy sector. It took solar 40 years to reach cost parity. Green buildings from like LEED certification, that kind of stuff, it's never got beyond like 3 to 5% of the overall market. And right now in this country, a quarter of all Americans lives in a jurisdiction that's adopted a building electrification code, and we have a lot more coming. And so the adoption of this, the fact that heat pumps have actually outsold gas furnaces the last 2 years, it's incredible. The amount of change has happened in a short period of time. And so for us, what we're really looking for is how do you provide certainty to the market? That's the number one things we hear from all of our members, the OEMs, the distributors, the installers, is we just need to know what the timeline is and that the timeline makes sense so that we're able to adjust. We're able to adjust our product lines to be able to make it. And so what we really fight for in public policy is what's a realistic timeline for this transition to happen on? And then let's make sure that the milestones on that timeline are actually going to work for the market and that we're clear and we're consistent. We don't have suddenly programs losing all their money after a year. We don't have sudden changes of direction all the time. I always say that, the market is like the rest of us. They just want TLC, transparency, longevity, consistency. And so those are the kind of things we fight for in public policy.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I mean, just putting my consumer hat on, I just need to know what's going on. I put my OEM manufacturing hat on, and I just need to know what's going on. Tell me what the rules are, and then we can play the game together. But if nobody knows what all the different rules are, but you said something in your introduction that kind of struck me, that you guys are focused on the buildings themselves more than the pieces and parts of it. Expand on that. Like what does that mean? Why is that a focus? Why do we care? I never thought of a building as a pollution generator.
Yeah, absolutely. So in general, every part of this country is different climate, warm climates, cold climates, really extreme winters, not at all. But in general, about 1/3 of all the greenhouse gas pollution in the country comes from buildings. And so if you care about climate change, if you want to address it, buildings have to be a fundamental part of the solution. In addition, we're starting to see a lot more of the air quality pollution. The pollution that creates smog is now coming from buildings as cars and power plants and industrial facilities are getting more and more clean. We haven't done the same level of work on buildings. And so burning gas in buildings is now an increasing part of smog. And so places like Denver, Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, you actually have burning gas in buildings is more smog causing pollutants than all the cars and the power plants combined in those areas, which usually surprise a lot of people. So these are all things that really are leading governments to now adopting laws to try to figure out how to make this transition.
So speak to the guy out there that's listening and thinking, okay, well, if we take out all the natural gas furnaces and we put in all heat pumps and we electrify it, the electricity comes from somewhere. Those plants are burning natural gas or whatever. Most of them are, there are some obviously that are solar or hydro, but the majority of our power is still coming from fossil fuels in America. So help me understand why it's still better for the environment if we electrify the houses.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you burn gas in your home, it's a pretty inefficient. Even the most efficient appliances that burn gas in home don't have anywhere near the efficiency of a central gas power plant. Those are the ones that are being built nowadays are incredibly efficient, and it makes way more sense to burn gas in that power plant to make electricity and then send it to a really high efficiency heat pump inside a home. There are just levels of efficiency savings in doing that. And so, we're burning a lot of natural gas to create electricity. Mm-hmm. That's good. That's cleaner than actually burning it directly in your home. Over time, we're going to be phasing more and more of that natural gas out. We're not done, Phillip, right? I mean, the changes in the electric grid are going to take place over the next couple decades, just like we're going to be putting heat pumps in every home over the next couple decades. So we're at a midpoint in the transition right now. We're at one of those points where we're not designed for where we want to be yet, and we're going to have to be making changes to the grid as we're making changes to buildings as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the technology in heat pumps has come a long way and still has some ways to go, I think, to reach certain climates that we have to be able to fully electrify in some of the very, very cold climates. What do you see as far as like a timeline? So let's talk heat pumps specifically. And I know different regions of different states may have their own initiative, and my assumption is you're trying to get everybody on kind of a more levelish playing field so we don't have, certain states pushing an agenda much sooner than all the other states. Maybe a southern state. I live in Georgia, so maybe they don't care about heat pumps as much as, Massachusetts, where they're more progressive and a colder climate. So the burn of the fossil fuels matters more up there. What are you seeing on a timeline when, get your crystal ball out? When are we going to stop seeing gas furnaces be installed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm here today to guarantee it. So the funny thing is, where do you see a lot of the deployment and the market penetration? It is in like southern states. And if you look at sales from the last quarter of heat pumps, like southern states are really leading the way. And it's not because of climate laws, it's not because of energy efficiency or clean energy laws. It's because in those areas it makes sense economically, right? They're replacing electric resistance. It may not have a built out gas distribution system. It just makes sense. So the funny thing is that there's much higher penetration in states without climate laws and states with climate laws across the country. So you asked me about the crystal ball. When are we going to stop seeing fossil fuel appliances being installed? I would say in some states, it's going to be the middle of the next decade, about the mid-2030s. You have about 15 states right now that are working together on a program to phase out the sale of gas appliances within their overall states by the middle to the end of next decade. And these kind of initiatives, they historically in clean energy, you always beat your targets. And so I think those are going to be moved up. And so I'm going to come on your podcast today and say about 2035, you're going to see about 15 states that collectively represent over half of all gas demand in buildings and half of appliance sales across the country. So it's only 15 of 50 states, but those 15 states represent a significant amount of market share that's going to have a huge impact on the other states that aren't adopting these laws as well. And it's going to start to create a ripple effect.
And I can probably guess, but who are some of the leading voices in that?
Yeah, Northeast, Upper Midwest. Okay. So Illinois, Minnesota, Michigan, Colorado, and the more Midwest, and then the West Coast.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of those have colder climates where they're burning a lot more fossil fuel. So it makes sense for them to want to push that. And I think it's going to have, if we get 15% of the states, not 15%, but 15 of the 50 states moving, that means the OEMs have to start developing the products. Yep. And it makes sense to me that the other 35 states are going to kind of just fall in line because the market's going to start shifting it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's our guess. I mean, I know that the manufacturers are already starting to think about what is the transition and how can the manufacturers actually be a partner in the transition with the federal government once it gets to that point. Because once you have a bifurcated market like that, where half of the market is doing one thing and the other half is not, you got to have some level of consistency. That just doesn't work for you guys.
No, we can't produce two different product lines. Exactly. We're going to make one product line that's going to work everywhere ultimately.
Yeah. So how do we have timelines that work? How do we have programs that will actually function and you can rely upon? How do you have transparency to laws? I think those are the critical things that you guys really need for this transition.
Right. So what do you see from your vantage point? What do you need from the OEMs? What are you looking for and asking for?
The biggest thing is we don't have OEMs involved in a lot of the state level legislation and program design that we need to have. You guys not only have the unique position of being manufacturers, but you have relationships with the distributors and the installers that are actually putting the product out there. And so you guys are very important voices as we're adopting the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act, as we're looking at new building codes, as we're looking at phase outs of gas appliances. We got to have the voice of the OEMs in there to see what's possible, what's realistic. Obviously, these sorts of laws are going to make you guys uncomfortable, but how can we make you only slightly uncomfortable as opposed to just unrealistically uncomfortable? And then it's about implementation. And nobody talks about implementation. People say, all right, we fought for years. We got the law passed. Now it's all going to work. And in this sort of space, we absolutely need to be focused more on implementation. And so how can we have the OEMs use your guys' unique opportunity to be able to work with distributors and installers to help educate them about the timelines, the changes, the programs, and to be able to give them the image, cut through the noise to say, here's what's really happening in the space. One of the things I get frustrated about is all this focus on installer education. I think by and large, the installers of America know how to install air conditioning. They know how to install heating systems. By and large, what we need is contractor engagement and contractor empowerment to be able to give them the tools to understand what's coming and to be able to help them make this sale so that people don't think they're just trying to upsell them on some crazy technology. Like, no, this is going to future-proof your home and get you ready for this transition. Then once you engage and empower a contractor, then they're going to be ready for some actual education around some of the particulars. But all this, I think, is really condescending to be thinking we need all this education for contractors when I think a lot of it's around engagement first.
Yeah, fair enough. And I work with a lot of contractors and I 100% see what you're saying. And I kind of see contractors in two different camps. Like you've got some of them that are, and I guess people in general are this way, they're pro change, oh, this is new, this is cool. I want to get on that bandwagon and frankly, take advantage of it from a business standpoint. I want to be the leading person in my community putting in cold climate heat pumps or whatever it is. And then you've got the other camp that's Well, I learned from my dad, who learned from his dad, who learned, they're third generation. Well, this is the way we've always done it. And I think some of that is we've got to get rid of that. Just because we've done it that way for 80 years doesn't mean that that's what we need to keep doing. So
yeah,
see what you're saying there.
And I think there's got to be some empathy in that, Phillip, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like these are multi-generational businesses, and you have governments and groups saying, we're going to change what has been the foundation of your family's business for generations. And there's got to be some empathy and some understanding and some help from the government in order to help make that transition.
Yeah, and I think some general awareness that this isn't really that different. When I talk to guys, they say, well, I want training on how to put in an LG system. I've never put in an LG system. Like maybe it's a whole home ducted system. And my answer is, have you ever put in an air handler and ductwork? Well, yeah, I do it every single day. Well, have you ever done a mini split and flared the connections and wired it like you do a mini split? Yeah, we do those all the time. Great, you've done our system. It pipes and wires like a mini split, and then it ducts like any other air handler you've ever dealt with. You're done. Like the education piece, kind of to your point, is there's not that much they need to learn. It's just they got to get out of their comfort zone and try something a little bit different. But I think to your point, it's not as different as they really are afraid of.
Yeah. And that's why I think the role of the OEM can be so important in that engagement period, about bringing them along, giving them that exact message.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to get you out on the road a lot more,
ready
talking
to go.
to these folks.
I'm ready to go. I love meeting with contractors. It's probably my favorite part of the job, is just getting out in the field, doing site visits, hanging out with them, and just going, hey, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I've more than once, been out with guys. I'm like, tell me when your first install is. And if I can be there, I'll be there. And we'll walk through it together. And usually by the end of it, they're like, well, you didn't do anything. I'm like, I know I didn't, because you already know how to do it. I just had to, hold your hand and walk down the street a little bit to make you feel comfortable about it. But yeah, I mean, it's not crazy. And then a lot of it is helping them understand. And I think, and maybe I'm wrong with this, but I feel like the people up north don't have this level of cynicism that the people through, not your deep south, but say like your Tennessee line,
Mm-hmm.
where they've had heat pumps for a long time, and they're like, they just can't, I'm not putting a heat pump in my house. There's no way. It won't give me enough heat. Well, people up north, they never experienced first generation heat pumps, so they don't really, they've always been on gas or fossil fuel, but we've got to get that whole, I can't heat my house with a heat pump. Then they've got to understand how to size it properly. So there is some education, I think less around the installation, but more around the design.
Yeah.
I can't just slap in a 120,000 BTU furnace in this house. It's not what it needs anyways, but.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing, the design and the sale, right? Like, how do you communicate this? And how do you dispel some of the myths? I mean, like, I live out in California, and we also got, people are like, it's going to be too cold for you to install a heat pump. Like, man, we're in California. You know who installs the most amount of heat pumps? Norway. Sweden is like, it's going to be okay. And that gets me to like the second answer to your question, Phillip, about what can OEMs do, and that's continue to innovate. The cold climate heat pump movement that's going on right now, and getting these products ready to be able to work for the Minnesotas, the Michigans, the Maines, and the like. That's going to be critical to the 120 volt heat pump water heater, so you can easily be able to put that in and be able to just plug it into regular outlet, or be able to have its own breaker. Like the continued product innovation, better form factors for heat pump water heaters. These are the kind of things that I think OEMs are going to be critical about, recognizing where are those market gaps and where are those policy gaps that your guys' innovation can help fill.
Yeah, yeah. And so you guys see, and you kind of jumped into the water heater thing, and right behind you is our beautiful water heater, heat pump water heater. But
I want to put it in my kitchen.
Come on. And the design of it is very European, because that's kind of where it was started at. And we brought it over to the States last year, and it's been a great mover for us. But do you see heat pumps in the water heater segment being a major piece of this as well? More so than the HVAC, as much complementary?
Yeah, we're really low market share for heat pump water heaters right now. I want to say it's under 10% nationally. I think that those are really going to take off probably in the 2030s. I think the HVAC side, the market's already knows, as you said, the market already knows how to install them generally.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movement towards it. And I think with heat pump water heaters, you have just some inherent market challenges. It's people didn't save space for a tank when they put in their tankless. You need that extra airflow for a heat pump water heater. So there's just some challenges here that I still think we're going to try to work out that is going to take a little bit of time for heat pump water heaters. So I would guess we have a lot of effort to really get them up to say 15, 20% of market share by the end of the decade. And then by the 2030s, we'll figure some of this stuff out and it'll be taken off.
Yeah, I think going from an electric tanked water heater to a heat pump water heater is probably the low-hanging fruit there, because you've already got the electrical requirements. They're very, an electrical one is very inefficient. If I remember right, the little yellow energy guide tag was like $700 on a 50-gallon electric tank, and on our heat pump, I think it was like $140 or something. And I know that every household's a little bit different, but good gracious, you're knocking $500 off of your power bill a year.
Yeah.
I mean, your return on investment's not very long at that point.
Absolutely. And and you guys produce one where you actually, you want to bring the neighbors by and show it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is nice. And I think next year we've got some other designs coming out as well. From what I'm being told about, trying to look at, how do we make it, we've got this gorgeous model, but how do we make it even a little bit more price competitive? Because if you look around the market, there's nobody that's got one that great of looking, which is great, but let's make it a little bit more attainable. Different sizes coming out. We have that 58 and then we have an 80 gallon. So there's lots of different demands. So
that's good to hear.
There's some cool stuff coming in the water heater line. I don't have a lot of the specifics yet, but I've seen some of the conversations, and this isn't going to be our only product forever.
It's really good to hear about LG's focus on affordability. That's going to be one of the building electrification's big areas of focus for the next few years, both upfront costs, what does it cost to buy it, but also operating costs. Programs like the Inflation Reduction Act and all those activities and state programs, those can really help bring down some of the costs, but we really need the OEMs to be helping out on this as well. And hopefully, as more and more of these products sell, you'll be able to help with the price point. But on the operating costs, what we're seeing is a big build out, the whole next generation of build out of the electric grid. And that just costs money for folks. And so we need to find a way to make sure that electrification is going to be encouraged through electricity rates rather than discouraged. For a lot of this country right now, gas prices are much lower than electricity prices. And you don't want to, really raise those gas prices up on folks unfairly, but you do got to have a more measured approach to electric rates so that we can actually encourage people to electrify rather than punish them when they do.
Yeah, and demand response comes into all that kind of stuff. Is that something that you guys have much focus on as far as demand response usage?
Yeah, it is, and particularly with heat pump water heaters, the opportunity to, when power is really cheap, when power is really clean, to be able to overheat water in these heat pump water heaters and use them like a thermal battery, and then you use them when you need that shower or the washing the dishes. Yeah. So absolutely, and then out in California, we had a couple of years there of the lights potentially going out, and it was through demand response and some good technologies that we were able to keep the lights on a couple of years ago. So it's a big area of focus for us, and we think a lot of the promise of electrification will be able to help with that.
Yeah, I know when we first launched that water heater, it didn't have a demand response capability, and since then we've retooled it and added that to a second model that has all the demand response. And I'll be honest, when I first heard about it, I was like, why are we bothering with all that other than to meet some criteria? But then when it was explained to me, kind of like how you just explained it, where, you don't heat the water except during certain times, it made a lot of sense. And, that pairs real well with like energy storage batteries and stuff like that LG makes. So we can, run your house off of a battery during the peak times and then charge your battery back up when electricity's low. And that helps the power companies, right? So they don't have those peaks, and they get to run their generators and their plants at a more level rate.
Exactly. And, from a consumer, right, it's all just like stuff up in the cloud. Like they just want, cold beer, hot showers, right? But if you can also be saving them money through some of this and they don't even have to do anything and it's all automated, fantastic value you're adding to your customers.
I mean, for most people, comfort is priority number one, but my power bill is priority number two. I love to sleep really cold at night, and I turn my airway down, and I tell my friends, you know what, I'll pay you that power bill because I want the comfort, but I'm also going to look at equipment that is going to make sure that my power bill is not astronomical, but we got to keep them comfortable because we're a little bit spoiled in this country. We truly are. Like, we don't suffer too much unless we have to.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I've been in the building space for about 25 years. And, time and again, I talked to installers over the years and, energy efficiency, nobody buys energy efficiency, right? You got to sell energy efficiency. People want what you said. They want comfort. They want health. They're concerned about sound. They're concerned about air quality. These are the things that actually sell HVAC systems, not energy efficiency, not climate change, all this sort of stuff.
Right. And the cool thing is that they kind of go hand in hand, right? Like, so we want inverter heat pumps. Well, that's a much more comfortable environment to live in because of it having the ability to ramp up and down and meet the load. It's actually going to be a more comfortable home than a traditional single stage air conditioner and a single stage or even a multi-stage furnace, especially when they're grossly oversized like so many of them are. You don't have those temperature swings.
Yeah.
So if we can keep them comfortable and save them money, that's when people start buying it.
I'm really excited to see more of your guys' leadership on the VRF side.
Yeah.
We need a lot more of it. And your focus on sizing. I mean, it is, we have grossly oversized systems in the country. And we really need OEM's help about how do you correctly size these homes.
Yeah. If any of the guys have ever been through any of my contractor trainings that I do, I tend to get on a little soapbox when it comes to sizing and probably beat that horse, that dead horse a little bit too much. But it's like, good gracious, I started at an air conditioning company years ago, and we did a manual J load calc every house we touched. And I just thought that was how it was done in the industry. And then I kind of moved on in my career, and I'm looking around going, holy cow, like, how in the world are these contractors not sizing their equipment properly? How are they having happy customers? How are they not getting sued by somebody for putting in the wrong size system? It scares me, but that's where I think the education needs to come in is not so much the installation. They can do that. Yeah. It's the awareness, and let's actually design it. And you said it, the design and the sale part is where we really need to do the work.
Yeah. And you bring that up, and it's one of the big issues that I see electrification taking a lot of the blame for just issues that we have in the HVAC industry right now. You're going to have people installing heat pumps and missizing them just like they've missized systems for a long time. And you're going to have people say, man, this damn heat pump, it doesn't work, or I don't like it. And I hate heat pumps. And the whole first wave of electrification is going to have a whole bunch of stories, not because of heat pumps, just because we have some real issues in the HVAC industry that we need to get, and sizing is one of the most critical.
I remember vividly being in a training class years and years ago and being told, hey, you can't oversize a mini split, it'll ramp down. And I'm looking back going, the foolishness of that. And so I have guys tell me, well, it's an inverter, so I don't really care about, I know it's too big, but it's an inverter. Like, I hear that all the time, and it's just like, no, it's not. You can't abuse it. Is a little bit more forgiving than a single stage? Sure. But can you just slap it in whatever size you feel like? No.
Yeah. It's one of our biggest fears too, is that, nobody posts on Nextdoor that they love their HVAC install, right? Like people get on there because they hate it. And what we don't want is this whole first wave of electrification being a whole bunch of stories about families left in the cold. They weren't able to respond to the extreme heat events because of the IRA's heat pumps. Yep. And so it's a really big focus of ours is how do we make sure that we're not only putting out heat pumps, but heat pumps, the right kind for the right area, installed in the right way.
Well, I can tell you that's one of the focuses of our LG Pro Dealer program and getting that education. And we're partnering with companies. We're partnering with Conduit Tech, which is a load calculation software that's done right on your iPad, and you can scan a room using the LiDAR detector, and it's fantastic.
Amazing.
And trying to get those tools to the contractors, both the awareness and the acceptance, and help them to improve their game, get them a little bit better. So that is something that we as an OEM are seeing a need for, and it's being incorporated into our contractor development track.
That's great.
Yep.
And how do we get customers to start demanding a higher level of quality too? I mean, that's the thing that I always hear from contractors is like, we're doing the right thing and we're getting undersold by all these guys that are just, instead of manual J, they're doing back of the envelope type stuff. And so the consumer education side, it's not just go electric. It needs to be go the right kind of electric. And here's a script, here's questions to ask your contractor to make sure they're the right contractor for you.
Yeah. That's one of the other soapboxes that I tend to get on is
you get a lot of soapboxes, man.
I do.
Yeah.
They asked me this morning, cause I had this coat on. When am I preaching? Well, I guess I'm preaching now, but, if you're the cheapest guy, you're killing everybody. You're killing your homeowner, you're killing your competition, and you're killing yourself. But we've got to, it's an expensive purchase, right? And so if you go up to somebody and say you have to spend X number of thousands of dollars and you don't give them a good reason, they're going to obviously choose the least costly thing that they can get. But if you want to upsell and you want to sell high technology, you've got to incorporate some financing in. And we've got some great financing partners too, but you've got to be able to go to the homeowner and say, hey, here's the best system for your home, and here's why this makes sense for you, but let's make it affordable. And so, that would be my message to a lot of contractors is, if you're going in there asking them to stroke you a check, they can't, most Americans just don't have the cash. And so even if they stroke you a check, it's probably being put on a credit card or pulling out of their retirement, or they asked mom and dad for a loan or something like that. Just because they write you a check doesn't mean that it came out of their checking account. And so, my message to contractors is get paired up with a good finance company. You're going to have, you're not going to be putting it on a credit card at 20+%. You can get reasonable, interest rates for your people and make it affordable for them. And now all of a sudden, they've got a payment of a couple $100 a month instead of stroking a check for $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, whatever that system is, it's a whole lot more attainable. So that's one of the things that we're also working towards with our contractors is educating them on this is why you should be selling it, but here's how to sell it. Here's actually how to go get the sale. When you've got Chuck in a truck trying to undercut you with a base model system for half of your cost, yeah, you can still sell that we'll call it expensive, the upper end, more efficient system is not the same cost as a base level, cheapest brand system you can get, but there's definitely ways to still get that sale.
Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I love that you guys are focused on the whole sale. It's not just here's our technology, here's how to install it, but you're actually thinking about them and their business and how they can be competitive in the market with your products. That's great.
I want them to grow. I tell guys all the time, I don't want one project. I don't want one sale. I want this to be a great experience for you because I want you to come back and back and back. Because I don't care if you buy from me once. I care if you continue to buy. So there's the what's in it for me. Like I want them to have a good process with LG from start to finish, from design to sale to install to service afterwards. We want to look at that whole life cycle of the system and make sure that we're helping our guys with that. But
that's great. Yeah. I tell my people all the time, you're terrible. No, I don't. I tell my people all the time that, this movement's going to be made or broken by installers. And if the installers don't buy in, if we can't get installers to be installing stuff in the right way, like that's going to break this movement. And so you're going to see a big focus from not only my organization, but other organizations in the space around installer engagement and contractor engagement coming up because they got to be the heroes of this story.
Yeah, I love it. Panama, we've covered some cool stuff. It was great to meet you. I've enjoyed our conversation. Anything that you want to throw out there that we didn't cover that you just want to make sure everybody knows?
Yeah, and I didn't want to scare everybody earlier with this, but Phillip, you travel around a lot, and so you see a lot of places, and you probably notice there's a lot of buildings in America, about 110 million buildings in America.
Good gracious.
And a lot of these states, are saying like, hey, we need to completely eliminate pollution in the next 25 years. And so you think about like, man, how many installs, how many switch outs, what's it going to take to actually eliminate pollution from buildings in 25 years? It starts to really, you question like, is this even physically possible? Then you also look at like, what's going to happen when you start to move people off the gas grid? And we're just starting to see this in California now as less and less people are on the gas grid, buying less and less gas. Those are fixed costs that the gas company has invested in their system that they're charging ratepayers in order to be able to pay off their financing. And so if there's less people on that, the people that are left on it are having to pay more. And so you're just starting to see the downward spiral of the gas industry as well. And then if you're looking at needing to build out the gas system and build out the electrical system over the next few years and gold plate them for the kind of disasters we're seeing now, we're looking at major investments in two systems. And so I say all that to give you a heads up on a trend that we're seeing. Our organization does analysis of all the legislation that's being introduced around building decarbonization around the country. And we can put in the show notes a link to 2024 analysis of all the legislation. But this approach to building decarbonization that is not appliance by appliance or even building by building, it's neighborhood by neighborhood. And it's called neighborhood scale building electrification. And what it looks like is a utility that's looking about doing a pipeline replacement to a neighborhood. And in different states, it costs a different amount of money, but this is expensive. This is a 70-year pipe. In New York, it's $6 to $10 million a mile. In Indianapolis, it's about $3 million a mile. California, $4 to $6 million a mile. Like really expensive work. And what you're seeing is utilities saying, man, this might make more sense for me to actually go ahead and electrify all the buildings in this neighborhood rather than put in this pipeline that's going to be out of date with our climate laws in 25 years, and we're going to have to figure out what to do with this stranded asset. And so this presents all sorts of opportunities, Phillip. Like if you're all of a sudden looking at doing, say, 200 homes at once rather than 100, that's 200 sales right there. That's no customer acquisition costs because the customers are already acquired right there. It's all a matter of conversation about we're going to bring $40,000 of free appliances to each of your homes, paid for out of the money that we would have spent on the pipeline improvement, have savings and reinvest that into savings for the rest of the gas folks. And so this neighborhood scale building decarbonization also allows us to focus on those communities that are most vulnerable to being left on the gas system. And so you're going to see a lot more of conversations about neighborhood scale building decarbonization. And it's a trend that I would advise folks to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, you hear all the time, you hear about our aging infrastructure. And I guess in my mind, it's always been, bridges and electric. Never really thought too much about the gas pipes underground. What's the lifespan? So now you got my brain thinking, all this natural gas grid that's underground, out of sight, out of mind. But so you say it's about 70 years old, depending where you're at. Is it aged out now? Do they have 10 more years on them? Like how long do those pipes have left?
Yeah. So my 70 number was the pipe that we put in the ground now, that's our life expectancy. A bunch of the stuff we have in the ground doesn't have that life expectancy. It's older stuff, it's iron, it's other products that we don't want in the ground anymore. So just about half of all the gas distribution lines we have in the country right now are over 50 years old and coming up for major replacement. Over the next 15 years, we're looking at about $700 billion of gas system improvement costs. And for us, we're like, wow, that's $700 billion, which if you add up all the programs for buildings in the IRA, this is like 40 times that amount of money. So if we could actually use half that money, 2/3 of that money for building electrification and say I get people on heat pumps off the gas grid, those are major investments that we're not going to have to make putting that pipe in the ground. That's going to be already out of date before it even reaches half of its life expectancy. And we're going to have to figure out a way to pay that off and pay off electrification.
Yeah, I mean, so now all of a sudden the mice on the wheel are starting to spin, and some things are starting to make sense, right? Some stuff that just in my mind I've just kind of been wondering, why the push for this, why the push for, and I get some of the reasons, but some of it's making sense now. So if we have a gas distribution system that we have to rip up and change, and that costs money, and we have an electric grid system that we have to improve on, if we prioritize the electric system, because we can't not have electricity at our house.
Right.
Now I guess some of the financial side of it, why would we want to invest all that money? Why would we want to go and put, to your point, $40,000 worth of appliances into somebody's home? I mean, good gracious, somebody's got to pay for that. But if the alternative is we spend billions of dollars on gas pipe that gets us really nowhere further than we are today, it's just a swap out of an existing piece of pipe. I guess the numbers start being a little bit more palatable for the average person that's thinking about, well, somebody has to pay for it. The government pays for it, but good gracious, that's our tax dollars. So that's my dollars and your dollars, really.
Yeah. And we've seen it, I feel so bad for the folks that have gone through the natural disasters recently, and you've seen that we're going to have to gold plate our electric system. Absolutely. And so does it make sense to gold plate two energy systems out into the future, where in many states, they don't even want that second, the gas system, in 25 years? Right.
Well, good, man. Well, I've learned a bunch. I always do when we bring people on, but I think you might have topped many or most of the others, because now my brain is working in overdrive. So
I can see the smoke.
Yeah. Be careful. That's dangerous. Teach me something. That's not always good. Oh man. Anything else that you want to throw out there?
I'll just plug our organization. We're here to help the market make sense of this and actually make sure that this transition makes sense for them. And so buildingdecarb.org, we put out a monthly newsletter that talks about everything that's happening in the space, new products coming out, new trends that we're seeing, new reports, laws that are passing. We have a regular webinar series that brings in top speakers to talk about this stuff. So we want to be a resource. We want to help folks on this transition and make sure it makes sense. So please use us.
Yeah. What's that website? Say one more time.
Buildingdecarb.org.
Buildingdecarb.org.
Got in early.
Awesome, man. Yeah. I appreciate it. Guys, thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have Panama Bartholomy with me, and join us for the next episode of the LG Procast. Thanks.
Thanks, Phillip. Thanks, y'all.